All right, so I have this box there, and this contains the ASKAR FRA400C that a lot of you have actually reached out to me to do a review on. So I asked ASKAR about it. They sent me this loaner one that I'll have to return after the review. And without further ado, let me take it out of its case, which is not really a case, it's just a box there. And there's no dedicated case for this FRA400C that comes at least with the package. It does come in the box with an adapter for visual astronomy. So if you want a telescope that can be used for both astrophotography and visual on occasion, this one is a contender for that category, because we do see a lot of telescopes these days that are only for astrophotography or for photography in general, like the ASKAR SQF55 that I have here. So let's look a bit more at this little nice telescope. What is it? First, it is a 72 millimeters aperture telescope with a focal length, as its name would imply, of 400 millimeters, which means that you have in a relatively compact package. Overall, it only weighs like 3.2 kilograms, something like that. You have a telescope with a decent focal length, 400, and a decent, although not exceptional, focal ratio of 7.5. If you're into like standard photography, the thing does come with a diaphragm integrated, so you can change the focal ratio on the fly. But for me, because I'm interested in astrophotography, I've left it wide open all the time. But yeah, you can go from f5.6 easily to f22 if you really want to slow things down and take long exposures of like rivers and waterfalls and all that kind of stuff. But you can see that it looks a bit like kind of a zoom lens. f5.6, it's good. But what's also interesting is I don't have it. You can actually buy an additional focal reducer that will go put it down to 280 millimeters focal length, if I remember correctly, for a focal ratio of f3.9. So that gets really interesting, because when you have like the main telescope and then you have the ability to add a focal reducer, and you have the ability to use a visual back, it turns into a multi-purpose kind of jack of all trades type of scope, compared to something that's much more specialized like the SQA55 that I have here, which is really for photography only. Doesn't have, as far as I know, any reducer, and cannot be used for visual. The scope itself is pretty standard. You have a lens hood at the front that you can expand. You have a dust cap that is similar to what you get with lenses for DSLRs. You have a focus ring here with a focus knob, and this focus ring will actually move the entire optical path or the optical train within the tube, so that this telescope is indeed a Petzval design, meaning that at the end, if you put your camera, as long as you reach focus with your camera, you don't care about the spacing between the tube and the camera sensor itself. I kept it at 55 millimeters for this review as usual, but it doesn't have to be 55 millimeters. As long as you achieve focus, you're good. You have, by the way, two dovetail plates for things like guide scopes or ASI air, that kind of stuff. And in between the two, you have some holes there, and those can actually be used to install something like an electronic focuser like the EEF. And there are instructions. You could basically buy your own timing belt and buy your own little pulley wheel or whatever we call it to install on the EEF. So probably with around like 10, 20 bucks, you're able to add an autofocuser with this without having to add or buy any custom parts like you would need to with something like the SQF55. You can see there's a whole lots of parts that I needed to buy from ASKAR to get it to fit with the EEF. With this, it's kind of like DIY, but you have all of the instructions to do so. I kind of wish that ASKAR would just provide like a couple of timing belts as well as the pulley for some popular electronic focusers, like at least the EEF, right? So that we could have it be possible directly out of the box. And of course, for that, you would need to remove this knob, which is the focus lock knob on the focuser, which, as far as I could tell, did not shift the focus at all for me, so it's very well machined. At the very end of the telescope, you have M48 threads here to connect your camera. So I ended up testing this with this like off-axis guider plus the SkyEye 24AC full frame camera from Tech, and I also used it with this camera, the same setup, but that's an APS-C size format, and also from Tech. I'll have the link to everything, including the telescope, down in the description if you're interested. If you remove that part at the very end, you actually get this little thing here, and you can further break it down like this. Like, for me, it was almost binding when I first got it, so it was difficult to get them to separate. But this part, which is the part that is going to be in contact with your imaging train here, this part has space for a 2-inch filter within. So you're able to install a 2-inch filter, which is also very much appreciated. It means you do not specifically need to have a filter wheel. Also on the telescope, you have this knob here, and this allows you to rotate the entire telescope on its own like that. It does not have a separate kind of rotator at the tip end, unlike something like the ASKAR-FRA400C. So if I go to my ASKAR-FRA400C, for instance, I have this knob here to rotate just this area of the telescope, and I have that knob there to rotate the entire telescope, except that right now I can't because of the timing belt that I have around this. But it's a possibility with something like the ASKAR-FRA400C. It's not really a possibility with the FRA400. You only have the rotation within the tube ring. In practice, what this means is that if you don't have an EF installed on this, but you'll definitely want one, I'll get back to that in a moment, but you could end up with a situation where once you find the right angle for your camera, well, the focus lock knob is like underneath the telescope here, so it's a bit more difficult to handle. Or if you've installed an EF on it, so your EF is connected to the focuser there, well, you can't really rotate the whole telescope through its rings because the EF belt actually prevents that from happening. So yeah, something to keep in mind there, that you only have one center of rotation or one element of rotation that's available here. That's one of the drawbacks that I found with this scope immediately. But going back to some positive stuff, is the dovetail, which is, I think, 30 centimeters long, something like that. And it's fixed in place by 4 bolts. The whole connection to the tube rings is fine. The tube rings is a classical tube ring that you can tighten here or remove completely. So it's very much classical telescope, well built, well assembled, very much in place, very stable. And again, I'm going to compare it back to the smaller ASKAR-FRA400C. By default, you have a single bolt attaching this, and then all the attachment to the telescope is done via some kind of like mini dovetail mounts that some people have had trouble with. And then the actual telescope ring itself is not removable, like the whole assembly can be removed if you want to repair it, that kind of stuff. But the ASKAR-FRA400C is, in comparison, slightly over-engineered, whereas the FRA400C is very standard, very good, but very well built at the same time, which is nice. So I've gone through the main features of this, and I will say one thing that I don't really like is that rotation is only of the entire tube, but if you have your own rotator, like the ZWCAA or something like that, doesn't really matter. But if you don't, it can be a problem. Let me also go to a second tiny issue that I had with this, is the dew shield. When I pulled it up like that, if I put just a Bahtinov mask on top, it would just like slide back down. And ASKAR has thought about that, so they have a tiny threaded hole here where you can put an M3 grub screw, which I happen to have on hand. And I added that, and I've set it up to exactly the right tension so that now the hood will not slide off when I put a Bahtinov mask or a flat panel on top, which is much nicer, but it would be nice to have this little grub screw in the box from ASKAR. It would be nice to have like this grub screw. Would be nice to also have the timing belt and the pulley for the main focusers. It would make this, a more out-of-the-box kind of experience, because this actually brings me to the main issue that I had with the telescope, using it to manually do focus for my tests, using, of course, a Bahtinov mask. So this is like an adjustable Bahtinov mask from Luke, from the Lucomotico channel. But yeah, the focus ring is not, it's too sensitive to me. Basically, at the very end, when I really want to have like my central bar and my Bahtinov diffraction pattern properly centered, I'd be doing tiny movement. Like, did you see any movement? You didn't, but that actually affected the focus. So you know where you're, that situation where you're like trying to move it as little as possible, you're moving a little bit, and then the central spike has gone the other way, and you've gone too far, so you need to go back, and it's a bit, I mean, I'm used to that kind of stuff. I've done this manually with much worse, let's say, focus rings like the Rokinon / Samyang lens, or even the Canon 200mm f2.8 lenses, where it can be really intense. But it definitely was intense with this guy as well. And so that's what I would note as a definite drawback if you're going to use it manually. I think for standard terrestrial photography, you'll be fine. But if you want to do astrophotography, I highly recommend fitting an electronic focuser to it, so that then you can just do the focus normally without having to think about anything really. But for me, that was the main drawback. And again, we can compare this with the SQF55, which has a secondary focus ring at the front there. That's fine focus adjustment. This is something that's lacking on the FRA400C compared to the SQF55. Why do I keep bringing up the SQF55 in this video? Well, it's simply because of the price of this thing. This thing is around $900 US, and the additional focal reducer that turns it into a telescope that has a similar focal length as the SQF55, but a faster focal ratio. It turns it into an f3.9, which is pretty nice compared to like 4.9 for the SQA, so considerably faster for roughly the same focal length. That reducer is around $260 or $50 US, something like that. So you can get a very complete package that can do visual, that can do astrophotography, that can do terrestrial photography, and that can have like either 400 millimeters of focal length or shorter, faster, 280 millimeters of focal length, something that's very versatile. But again, if you get the whole package with the reducer, which I don't have, you'll be out like $1,150 US, something like that. So definitely something to keep in mind. And then we compared to this, which has, I think, 276 millimeter. I don't remember the actual focal length. Smaller aperture. It has its own drawbacks as well, but it's the same price range. I think that naked, it's $800 US, but then you really want to add like the EEF, and so you need to buy the adapter kit. That's, I don't remember, 50, something like that. So yeah, it's like in terms of price, if I were to think like, oh, I'm wanting to buy a telescope for around $800, $900 US, this one, the SQF55, and this one, the FRA400C, would be the first two that pop into my mind, right? So that's why I keep mentioning the SQF55, because you know that I love the SQF55. It has amazing star shapes throughout the field of view on full frame. And so talking about star shapes, how do they look like with this telescope on both an APS-C camera and the full frame Sky 24AC camera from Toptech? Well, I've already done those tests. I've taken images of star fields, and so we'll be able to do some pixel peeping on the computer. So let's get to it. Before we do that, remember that this is a lot of work. If you want to support the channel, you can like the video, watch it till the end. That also helps a lot. You can leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think at first glance of this telescope there. And if you want to support the channel even more at no cost to you, and you're planning on buying anything from Agena, High Point Scientific, Amazon, etc., if you do so after clicking one of the links I have down in the description, including for this telescope, it will help me out at no cost to you. If you want to become a direct sponsor of the channel, you can also join the channel as a member. This is the join button next to the subscribe button, or you can join my Patreon. The link is down in the description. Some of my Patreons have access to my videos early and without ads. Oh, and you can buy cool merch as well, Order of the Lazy Geeks. If you're interested, the links are in the description. Okay, I'm on the computer. I want to first show you a little bit like how the field of view looks with that particular telescope with different sensor sizes, how it looks at f3.9 roughly, and with something at a similar price, which is the SQF55, so we can have an idea. So here we are. This is on a small target like M1, and you can see the red square is if you were to use a full frame sensor, basically the same as the Sky 24AC that I did my tests with. And so you can see it's a very large field of view. It's going to be a bit easier to see on M31, but let's look at just the Crab Nebula for now. And in green, we have an APS-C size sensor, and in yellow, we have the 585 sensor, tiny sensor with tiny pixels, which I really like. And you can see that for this particular telescope, for small targets with the 400 millimeters focal length, the 585 is actually a pretty decent choice that looks like it can have a decent way of imaging small-ish targets like M1, like the Crescent Nebula, like M27, that kind of stuff. So it's a like 400 millimeters. Overall it's a nice sweet spot to go a little bit deeper than the super wide field stuff that you get like with the 250 to 300 millimeters telescopes. So that's something that's good with the FRA400C. It's the focal length there that allows you to go a bit like deeper than with the small refractors, while keeping small and light on its own. On M31, we can see that full frame in red, encapsulates the whole target very comfortably, while APS-C in yellow here encapsulates M31 like almost completely. There's probably some nebulosity going out of the frame, at least with this angle. But you can see it's very well manageable. And so with like large targets, APS-C and full frame are a very good match for this telescope. In green, you can see that's the 585 sensor. And now it's like for large targets like M31, it starts to be a bit too small, right? But it's still, I think, a pretty versatile focal length. If we look in comparison with a focal length of 264 millimeters, which is the SQ55, it's very close to 280 millimeters, which would be the FRA400C with the reducer. You can see on M31 that because we're now in a much smaller focal length, both like the full frame and the APS-C format kind of like cover too much field of view for even a large target like M31. So this very large field of view is really nice for very wide areas of nebulosity. That's super cool, but it might be overkill for actually a lot of targets. And it does put like small targets a bit more out of reach. But if you go to the 585 sensor, or even better would be the 533, let me add that as well. Here we go, I added the 533 in purple. Then you cover the entirety of M31 with a small sensor. That's where I appreciate the versatility of something like the FRA400C, as long as you also buy the reducer, visual 400 millimeters, 280 millimeters. Well, let's also have a quick look at the spot diagram of the FRA400C. So this is the spot diagram at the center of the field of view, and then as you go through the images, it's further and further away from the center of the field of view. We cover from 430 nanometers to 700 nanometers, which is okay. It should cover from 400, but yeah, this is fine. And the scale is 10 microns per square side, basically. So 10 microns per square size. And we can see that at the center of the field of view, we can expect stars to be around 20 or 10 microns radius. And the star shapes look pretty nice all of the way to APS-C formats. And it does start apparently to degrade a bit. We can expect it to degrade a bit at 22 millimeters, so the edge, the corners really of full frame. So that's pretty decent spot diagram. And if we look at the spot diagram with the reducer, which is also published, we can see that now the scale is 20 microns per square. So the radius is more towards like 15, 16 microns at the center of the field of view. And it stays fine, kind of fine, all the way to APS-C. It seems that it will start to break down around full frame. So while with the reducer it is on paper usable until full frame, the stars might get a bit bloaty really at the edge of full frame with the reducer. Something to keep in mind if you're looking to purchase this telescope specifically for its versatility. But still, it looks pretty cool, pretty nice, pretty standard, although it's definitely not at the same level in terms of being wowed by the spot diagram compared to something like the SQ55 with its f4.9 focal ratio. So now we can look at some results. First on M13, this is with APS-C sensor, which I hadn't cleaned for a long while. So all of those big black round thingies, including this one here, they're just dust motes on my filter and or on my sensor window. So they're not relevant for evaluating the optics. And I only performed a simple auto stretch on the image. And at the center of the frame, we have all of the stars of M13. This is with a reasonable pixel size of 3.6 microns and looks perfectly fine to me. This is without any processing. The stars are nice and sharp and small. It's actually a bit better than what I was expecting from the spot diagram. So this looks perfectly fine. We can keep doing some pixel peeping in the corners. In the corners of APS-C, if we really pixel peep, you can see that the stars do start to look slightly elongated. I can go to the bottom right corner. It's less obvious there, much less obvious there. Actually, I might have just a little bit of tilt. And bottom left corner is actually very round stars, not a big problem. Top left, maybe very slightly elongated, but you can see on APS-C size sensor, this is a very nice telescope, and I don't see really any issues with that. Obviously, you make your own judgment. Are those star shapes, acceptable to you or not? Let's look at a full frame result. Here we are. So the full frame result, first I will tell you, like, this arc of like whitish blue light is actually not caused by the telescope. It is caused by my luminance filter. I think its sides are a bit too reflective, and that's what it causes, because let me show you what it looks like without any filter, which is, I don't want to actually judge the star shapes without filters, because then you obviously have some potential issues with UV-IR cut not being applied. But without a filter, this is what a single frame looks like on full frame. So we have a very small drop-off in luminosity at the very corners of the image, but I did check the difference between the center and the edge, the very edge of the image, and we have if we have 100% luminosity in the center, at the very corner of the worst corner we had 82% luminosity left. So the vignetting is quite minimal, and it really happens at the very edge of the image. Okay, with that in mind, I can also show you, by the way, this is with a narrowband filter, so HA03. And again, we don't see that weird kind of whitish blue circle there, which is definitely caused by my UV-IR cut filter. We do see that the corners at the very edge start to get less bright. But that is to explain that don't be panicked by this large circle there. It is not due to the telescope at all. Anyway, we are centered on a star, maybe Deneb, I don't remember, and at the center of the field of view. And now we have larger pixels, I think like 5 point something microns. So the larger pixels make it less easy to pixel peep, but here we are, center of the field of view. Everything looks fine. And something I forgot to mention, by the way, what I'm showing you is a stack of 1 hour's worth of data of 30 seconds frame. So 120, 30 seconds frame stacked, because that lets us reveal any artifacts that we could get with this telescope, like chromatic aberration, that kind of stuff. So center of the field of view, and there's no calibration whatsoever. Center of the field of view, the stars look perfectly fine. Let's do our pixel peeping in the corners. And in the corners, you can see we do start to get elongated stars at the very corners of full frame. I would say it really starts to be noticeable around here, very close to the edge. And we do see a similar level of elongation of the stars in the bottom right corner as well, in the bottom left corner as well, and in the top left corner as well, with the stars very slightly out of focus. We might have a little bit of tilt, but otherwise it's, if you zoom in just a little bit, like even if I'm zoomed in to that extent, it's not quite noticeable. That said, if this level of stars at the very corner of full frame is not acceptable to you, keep it in mind. But overall, this is actually, all of those results, especially at the corner of full frame, the results look better than what the spot diagram would actually suggest. So I'm personally not disappointed at all, by this. But again, if this is a problem for you, this is something to keep in mind. But otherwise, we get like an overall, I think, fairly pristine kind of full frame field of view with that caveat of the elongated stars in the corners. So yeah, keep that in mind. Good thing though is that I might be wrong, let me know in the comments if that's the case, but I don't really see any very obvious, let's say, chromatic aberration. There's like maybe a little bit of blue on this side and red on that side of the stars, but it's very well controlled. So yeah, in terms of optical quality, it's not something that blows me away like the SQ55 did, but it's very reasonable, especially when you think that this is a larger, like it's a small refractor, it's still small and light, it's very versatile, and it's still 400 millimeters of focal length, which is quite decent. It gives you a decent amount of reach in a relatively small and light package. So overall, that's the results that I get with this telescope. So the only, I would say, drawbacks to this telescope at that price of around $900 US is that there's no fine focus on, like, for manual focus. You only have the coarse focus ring that's available. And yeah, I really had to be very, like, really small moves, Ellie. Like, you need to be very careful with that. But once you have an EF installed, which you would if you're going to do astrophotography, it's fine. And the second drawback was really the rotation is only available via the ring of the telescope. There's no secondary rotator, which, that means that the rotation of the telescope is not going to be available once you have an EF installed, or, you need to loosen the pulley screw, for instance, so that you can actually rotate the telescope and then put it all the way back. But that's doable. And of course, the fact that I had to use that little grub screw M3 to be able to really have a nice lens hood without that tiny grub screw. It was a bit too loose to use a flat panel on top or a Bahtinov mask. So those were the main drawbacks. Otherwise, while I have complained about how coarse the focus is, something I've already mentioned, like when you lock, there is no shift in focus that I could detect. So that was very nice. And the focus itself is quite smooth. Even though it's coarse, it's very, very smooth to move things around. So no problem whatsoever. You are able to get a filter inside of the telescope, unlike something like the SQ85, which is much more expensive. Overall, I think the star shapes across the field of view are acceptable, especially on APS-C. They do start to break down a little bit on the full frame sensor, so something to keep in mind. But for the price of $900 USD, again, I think I'm perfectly fine with that. Whether you are or not depends on you. And I actually really like that it can be used for visual. Without buying anything else on the side. And I kind of want to do that, like take it on vacation just for visual, because for a Milky Way browsing telescope, it has the right aperture and it has the right focal length to be paired with like a 2-inch 26 millimeters eyepiece. That sounds really nice, actually. Maybe I'll try that out. But again, this is more of an astrophotography channel, so that's why I focused literally on the astrophotography aspect. And so when you look at the ASKAR range, around $800 to $900 US, you kind of have the choice between like basically optically amazing tiny telescope, the SQ55, also mechanically quite impressive, although it does have its drawbacks with its weird like dovetail mounts, and it has a much shorter focal length. Or you have an all-rounder telescope that you can bring down to the same roughly focal length as the SQ55 if you spend the additional $250 US for the reducer. Then you get like the incredible f3.9 focal ratio, and you can use it visually, and you have that reach at f5.6 if you want to image like smaller targets. Very versatile. And so which one would you choose? Which one would you get? It really depends on you and your needs. And when I looked at the FRA400C at first, I'm like, yeah, I'll stick with the SQ55. After testing it, I understand why it exists. And I understand that it can fulfill the needs of a lot of people. So yeah, there it is. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Would you buy this telescope? Would you recommend it? Do you have it? And how is it working out for you? I'll love to see your comments. You can leave a like on the video. It really helps the channel out. And of course, if you want to support the channel even more, you're planning on buying anything from Agena, High Point, Amazon, etc. If you do so after clicking one of the links that I have down in the description, it will help me out at no cost to you. You can sponsor the channel directly by becoming a channel member. It's the join button next to the subscribe button, or a Patreon member. The link is down in the description. You guys, you are amazing. You make all of this possible. Thank you so much for your support. But more important than all of that, I hope this was interesting. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, whenever you can, to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.